ก็เซลล์โลก่อนนะ
When the world is in crisis and people are looking for hope and answers, Thai PBS World is there with you with the best minds of the day. Join us on Thai PBS World tonight, every weekdays at 7 p.m. Thai PBS World, we bring Thailand to the world.
Swadika, very good evening and welcome to Thai PBS World Tonight. I'm Nad Bunag.
Good evening, I'm Thep Chayong. So, two pieces of good news today. More spending money by the government is on its way for at least 24 million Thai people. And then more holidays for everyone.
That's definitely good news for today.
That's right. The cabinet today approved a stimulus package that will see a 3,000 baht handout for 10 million people, amounting to about 30 billion baht. And another 21 billion baht will go to 14 million welfare card holders. All these constitute a spending package designed as further help for people affected by the impact of the coronavirus pandemic and to help stimulate the economy.
Even more good news, the cabinet today also approved 2 sets of additional holidays for November and December. That means Thai people will have 2 long weekend holidays waiting for them, and the idea is for them to travel and spend. This is part of the government's plans to revitalize the tourism industry, which has been hard hit by the pandemic. So I guess it's time to pack your bags and get ready for your next vacation.
I'm sure we are certainly looking forward to those additional holidays, right? But tonight let's start with politics. The struggle for Thailand's political future now is being shifted back to the parliament. Tomorrow, the legislative branch will sit down and discuss what is probably the most troublesome aspects of Thailand's current politics, that is the constitution. And it will be a joint sitting of the House of Representatives and the Senate. And the first thing that they have to do tomorrow is to decide how to handle the 6 motions submitted separately by political parties seeking to amend the constitution. These 6 motions have the same objective, that is a new constitution, but they differ in details. And now let's take a look at some of the motions that will be taken up for debate tomorrow. Let's start with the 2 motions proposed separately last month by political parties in the Prayut coalition and the 5 opposition parties. Both motions seek to amend Article 256 of the Constitution to pave the way for the setting up of a Constitution drafting assembly to write a new charter. The idea of an assembly to draft a new constitution is very much similar to the People's Constitution Drafting Assembly that drafted the 1997 Constitution. Back then, it comprised representatives from various people from various walks of life who gave birth to what was recognized as Thailand's most democratic constitution. Article 256 is seen as a major stumbling block to any attempts to revise the constitution. It basically gives the Senate overwhelming power to determine whether the constitution can be amended or not. The article specifies that any amendment to the constitution requires support of at least 1/3 of the Senate. That means at least 84 out of the 250 senators must give their approval if a constitutional amendment is to pass in its first reading. And that's just the first hurdle. In the third and final reading, a simple majority of both the House of Representatives and the Senate, that is 375 out of 750, is needed for a constitutional amendment to be passed. So, in short, it means that amending the Constitution without the support of the Senate will be something next to impossible. So, the biggest challenge for politicians seeking to amend the Constitution is to convince the senators to go along with them. But one reminder, all the 250 senators, many of whom serving and retired military officers, were either directly or indirectly handpicked by the military when it was in power after the coup d'etat in 2014. Their role as enshrined in the Constitution was essentially designed to ensure General Prayut's return as Prime Minister after the general elections in March last year. A few senators have indicated that they are willing to consider taking part in the Constitution amending process, but the majority seems to be silent while Prime Minister Prayut himself has yet to make known his stand on the issue.
And there are the other 4 motions which are more drastic in content. They basically seek to put an end to all the powers of the senators and to hold the military accountable for its past deeds. Most important of all, they want to move the Senate's role in the appointment of the Prime Minister. It was because of the unanimous support from the Senate. General Prayut became Prime Minister despite the fact that the party that supports him, Palang Pracharat, came second in the general election. They also want to do away with Article 279, which legitimizes all the executive orders issued by the military junta and all actions taken by it. In short, they want to hold the military retroactively accountable for all what they see as its abuse of power and misdeeds. Changing the electoral system is also among the changes they are seeking. They believe that the current electoral system is skewed in favor of political parties supported by the military. Among the parties advocating the drastic constitutional amendments is Gao Gai, or Move Forward Party, a reincarnation of the Future Forward Party, which was dissolved by the Constitutional Court earlier this year. Reforming the military and holding it accountable for its past deeds was part of its election platform. But what happens tomorrow and Thursday will be only the first step of a very long process that might take around a year. And don't forget that whatever comes out of it will eventually be subject to a referendum.
That's right. And of course, we don't forget the fact that the views on this issue have been so divisive. So certainly there will be a lot of noises from both inside and outside the parliament on this issue. And on the 24th, that is 2 days from now, the student protesters who rally at Sanam Luang over the weekend said they will come back and put pressure on the legislators to comply with their demand that the constitution be totally revised so that the country will have a totally new constitution to be drafted by a group of people that will be representing a broad spectrum of people in the society.
And of course, what happens outside the House chamber will also be equally interesting. Rival groups, both for and against the constitutional amendment, have promised to show up at the parliament to press their case. Fresh from what they see as a victory with a mass rally at Sanam Luang on Saturday, anti-government protesters will converge at the parliament this Thursday to put pressure on the legislators to comply with their demand on the new constitution. The protesters want a totally new constitution to be drafted by an assembly that represents people from all walks of life. They also want to do away with most of the powers that the current Senate has. The rally this Thursday would be the biggest so far at the new location of the parliament in Giagai area.
And taking a totally opposite approach is the self-proclaimed royalist group known as Thai Pakdi. Its leader, Warong Detkit Vikrom, will lead a group of Thai Pakdi supporters to submit a petition with House Speaker Chun Lik Pai on Wednesday to voice objection to the ongoing attempts to amend the constitution. He said his Thai Pakdi group has gathered as many as 130,000 signatures in support of the petition. Warong insisted that the current constitution represents the will of the majority of Thais, as it was supported by as many as 6 million people in the referendum in 2017. He said the constitution is suitable in the current Thai political context, and the amendment being sought will benefit only politicians and not the public. Warong accused anti-government protesters of seeking to subvert the monarchy with the demand for a reform of the royal institution. Meanwhile, a non-governmental human rights group this afternoon submitted its version of the new constitution to the parliament. The document, described as People's Constitution by the Internet Dialogue on Law Reform, or ILAW, is accompanied by a list of over 100,000 people who signed in its support. The signatures were gathered in a campaign launched by ILAW in early August and culminated in the anti-government rally at Sanam Luang over the weekend. Hundreds of people today joined a symbolic march organized by ILAW that began at Taupun MRT station and ended at the parliament, where its director, John Eungpakon, submitted the document with a senior official of the House of Representatives. Also present were some key figures of the opposition bloc, including Sutin Kangsang and Pheu Thai Party and Pitha Limcharoenrat of Move Forward Party. ILAW manager Ying Cheep Atchanon said the so-called People's Constitution seeks to dismantle the legacy of the military dictatorship and to bring Thailand back to genuine democracy. It also calls for the Senate to come from direct elections and for the Prime Minister to be an elected MP. Deputy Prime Minister Pravit Wongsuwan said today that there's nothing to worry about with the rally at the parliament this Thursday. He dismissed fears that the protesters might try to trespass the compound. And meanwhile, Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha said he wanted to see an end to the ongoing political conflicts, which he claimed that in the end would not benefit anyone. There will be no losers or winners, but it's the country that will suffer. That's what I'm most worried about, he said today in a brief interview with journalists.
Another big story for today, which alarmed many of us, is the leak of FinCEN files, which exposed how some of the world's biggest banks allowed criminals to move dirty money around the world. And what is even more alarming is that there are 4 Thai commercial banks were reportedly involved in suspicious activities. The top executives of 4 Thai banks held talks today on their response to allegations of suspicious transactions revealed by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, or the ICIJ. The ICIJ reports are based on leaked files comprising of so-called suspicious activity reports, or SARs, by the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, or FinCEN, in the United States. The ICIJ found 92 transactions involving 4 Thai banks, receiving $9.6 million and remitting around $31.7 million between 2000 and 2017 that were flagged by financial institutions as suspicious to the U.S. authorities. The 4 banks named in the report are Bangkok Bank, Kasikorn Bank, and 2 state-owned banks, Krung Thai Bank and Export-Import Bank of Thailand, or known shortly as Exim Bank. According to the ICIJ reports, the data involving Thai banks represents only a small fraction of more than $2 trillion worth of transactions found in the FinCEN files. The data map also provides information about U.S.-based correspondent banks that allow financial institutions in more than 150 countries and territories to process payments in U.S. dollars. The records include more than 2,100 suspicious activity reports filed by nearly 90 financial institutions to FinCEN. However, the transactions do not necessarily establish any criminal conduct or other wrongdoings. The data offers an unprecedented overview of how money flagged as suspicious and in some cases linked to corruption, fraud, sanctions evasion, or other crimes flows around the globe via networks of correspondent banks. Meanwhile, Exim Bank released a statement in response to the scandal, which clarified that there was nothing unusual about the transactions in question. The bank has investigated the matter and they have not found any suspicious transactions. The bank also stated that they've complied with all legal and regulatory obligations related to the prevention of money laundering. The FinCEN files became a worldwide scandal at the moment as it revealed how some of the world's biggest banks, such as HSBC, JP Morgan, Deutsche Bank, Standard Chartered, and many more have been involved in suspicious transactions. So that is another big story for today apart from politics.
Certainly will be a subject of debate for days to come. So what else do we have today?
And just so you know, these are the stories we've also been following.
Thailand recorded 5 new cases of COVID-19 today. 4 of them returned from India and another came back from Switzerland. All of the new cases are now under state quarantine. The new cases raised the total number of infections in the country to 3,511, with 1 new recovery and no new fatalities. Prime Minister General Prayut Chan-o-cha has instructed authorities to coordinate with Interpol to issue a red notice for Red Bull Air Warayut Yuwithaya to have him provisionally arrested and held, pending extradition back to Thailand to stand trial on charges related to the fatal hit-and-run case. Previously, the Office of the Attorney General decided to drop all charges after it received new evidence from the police claiming that Warayut was not speeding at the time of the accident. The Royal Thai Police did not challenge the decision at the time, resulting in public outrage. The cabinet today approved a stimulus package that will see a 3,000 baht handout for 10 million people. It is part of the 51 billion baht spending package approved earlier by the government to help people affected by the impact of the coronavirus and help stimulate the economy. The remaining 21 billion baht will go to 14 million welfare cardholders who will each get 500 baht more every month for 3 months between October and December from 1,000 baht currently. The cabinet has also approved more special holidays to boost domestic tourism and the economy, as suggested by the Ministry of Tourism and Sports. The new long holiday is set for November 19th until the 22nd, and another long holiday from December 10th to the 13th.
So may I repeat that once again? The 2 long holidays that have been approved is for November 19th to the 22nd, and another one in December 10th to the 13th. So each of them will be a 4-day holiday.
So mark those dates. Very important.
Definitely.
And the advice from the government is that take full advantage of those additional holidays. Pack your bags and then prepare to leave town. Spend money.
Definitely. I think everyone is happy right now because there are 2 more holidays. So if anyone has their dream destination for their next vacation, just start planning.
That's right. We should be celebrating because compared to many of our neighbors, I think we are in a much better shape as far as our situation in dealing with the pandemic is concerned. Look at our immediate neighbor to the west, Myanmar. The country's major city, Yangon, is now under another round of lockdown now, starting yesterday, right? Our businesses have certainly come to a halt. And we just heard today that at least 4 major newspapers based in Yangon have decided to stop publishing their daily hard copies paper because they said that they could not afford to have their journalists risk their life by going out and gathering stories, and the delivery people being out there being exposed to the potential of infection. So this is the latest from our immediate neighbor.
I think the suspension of newspapers is also a good idea because when we hold the newspapers, you don't know where it has been from. Like for example, one person might hold a newspaper and then it gets passed on to other people.
That's right.
And there's another good point here that it's not really worth it to make the journalists risk their lives just to get the stories, especially the COVID-19 situation in Myanmar is getting worse.
So the residents of Yangon have no choice but to read news online because at least 4 leading newspapers, Myanmar Times, the Voice Daily, the Standard Times, and 7 Days, these are major daily newspapers in Yangon. They are all based in Yangon, the former capital of Myanmar. And so starting this week, no hard copies for the residents of Yangon. And the latest that we have heard from Myanmar is that the Election Commission still insists that they will hold the next general election as scheduled. That is the 8th of November, despite petition from at least 20 political parties that the election should be postponed. All right, so that's the latest from our neighbor, Myanmar. Now back to Thailand. So the student protest claimed victory with their Sanam Luang rally over the weekend. So certainly, I mean, they have reason to celebrate. They made their voice heard and they did submit the demands to the people that they believe that will listen to it. And but what does it mean? And what more should we expect from this point on? Tonight we'll talk to a senior advisor on security to the government.
And right now we have คุณปณิธานวัฒนายากร Chairman PM Security Advisory Committee joining us through a video call right now สวัสดีค่ะ
สวัสดีครับ
สวัสดีครับ
So thank you for joining us, คุณปณิธาน I think we all should heave a big sigh of relief that the protest ended peacefully. But did you expect the rally to end the way it did, with the protesters installing the symbolic democracy plaque on Sanam Luang and then submitting a petition demanding a reform of the monarchy to the Privy Council?
Well, I think we are glad Thai people are quite relieved that demonstrations like these are peaceful, and it was quite orderly, and the authority in charge in the areas are quite effective in handling the situations. And of course, this is just one of the series of demonstrations. Several groups are now planning to engage, especially next month, October month in Thailand is said to be a political month with many historical dates. So I think the real concern will be focused on next month's demonstrations. But in general, I think we are quite hopeful that with the experience of the authority on the ground, with the lessons learned by society, and there will be no violence erupted during series of these demonstrations.
So what do you think is the strongest message that came out of the rally at Sanam Luang over the weekend?
Well, it's a political message for change. I think that's quite clear. Demonstrators in general are older than expected. I think estimated that young generations who were demonstrated in the last demonstration are less than half, or even maybe 1/4, of the whole demonstrators. I think, but of course they share concerns about the future of Thailand during this time. They demanded changes. Most of the changes are quite all expected and focused on the administration. With one new change, I think the message about the monarchy, about the institution, high above is quite clear. Young generations are particularly more concerned about the future of that particular institution.
Now we noticed an overwhelming presence of the people from the so-called red shirt movement. Do you think that this in any way dilutes the perception that the demonstration, at least the one that took place at Sanam Luang, was student-led?
Well, I think demonstrators from previous years have experience on the ground. I think on the ground you need a much better organization than young groups' capability. You need to have food, shelters. You need to have networks of people traveling from several provinces. There are quite a few provinces in the north and the northeast that these people are coming from. They are well organized. They are very much focused on the debates, on the stages, various stages around Sanam Luang. I think on one hand, I think students could be happy that they are joined by a large number of the demonstrators from the past, although the expectation was higher. They wanted more young generation joining, but due to several limitations, as you already know, the society already discussed about that. So I think the joining of not only the red shirt demonstrators, but demonstrators from labor sector, demonstrators from non-governmental organization, sector, and of course, general public who are very concerned about economy, about the stage, of the progress in Thailand also joined in, although those numbers are maybe smaller than a more organized groups, but in general, the event was moved to the higher level, especially overseas. The news are now out that Thailand is back in a more normal mode since the coup many years ago. Normal mode means that you will see different forces demanding different recognition, different changes. This is quite normal in Thailand. It proves also that freedom of assembly, freedom of speech are also guaranteed in Thailand, although there are perhaps concerns among various officers and authorities that some of these demonstrators may exercise their right beyond the legal limit. That has to be proven in court. I think in the next few days and in the coming weeks, there will be a few cases charged against some demonstrators, some organizers who are violating a series of law, including public gathering law and other emergency decree regulations. But of course, those have to be handled by court, not by authority, not by the police. So I think, yes, things are now back into a more normal mode under the abnormal or abnormal time during the spread of the COVID. But the Thai people, especially this section, especially some of these demonstrators, they want to exercise their right, and they are now guaranteed their peace and freedom to do that.
And with the protesters that took over Sanam Luang on Saturday, which is the royal ground, do you think the protesters have taken too far?
Well, I think, yes, some of the observers, some of the Thai people are quite concerned about that. But there are laws regarding the use of Sanam Luang. There are also practices of allowing some of the demonstrators to use that. This is not new. Sanam Luang has been historic in terms of the monument of certain political activities. But of course, Sanam Luang in principle belongs to the nation and is registered at the part of the historical preservation. It has certain rules and regulations to regulate the use of Sanam Luang. And of course, and most importantly to the Thai people, this is a place that royal cremation takes place during the time of sadness of the passing, of several kings, several high-level leaders in the palace. So it has to be used with respect and regard. Political, symbolic, political gestures must be done within the law, within the care of the feelings of the people who are attached to Sanam Luang in different ways, different from the demonstrators.
So from a national security perspective, how do you think the government will handle with future demonstrations that might come up?
Well, I think the government is quite clear. Deputy Prime Minister for Security, Prime Minister in particular, on several points. Of course, first, the safety of all Thai people must be guaranteed, including the demonstrators. You can see the operations of the forces are done without any weapons or any using forces. So I think that's one clear message that the authority must provide safety to the people in the area and to the general public in general. There are a lot of rules and regulations to follow in doing that on the side of the authority. And second, of course, as long as this is according to the law, rules, regulations guaranteed by the Constitution, it has to be allowed and it has to be accepted. And this is very clear from the government point of view. And lastly, of course, is part of the debate, the proper use, the proper message, the way the demonstrators are communicating to the public. It has to be done according to the Prime Minister in such a way that it will not entice any anti-feelings against them or any ill feelings toward the society. So I think if that is done correctly and properly, we should not expect any security concerns or security problems coming from these demonstrations.
Dr. Bandithan, the way that international media have been covering the series of rallies by the students, including the most recent one at Sanam Luang, and especially the headlines of some of the major news outlets, they give the impression that the ongoing conflict is a confrontation between the new generation of Thai people and the monarchy. I'm sure that you must have been asked by a number of foreign correspondents for your views on this issue, but how do you address it?
Well, I think young generation may be more concerned about the institution that they are not very familiar with. They were born and raised during the changeover in the monarchy, and they have not seen the vital, pivotal roles and capability of the monarchy in terms of providing stability and continuity during the communist era, during the uprisings and of the student demonstrations in the 1970s and 80s. They have not seen and maybe not truly appreciate the role of the monarchy. So this is what they may be feeling of concerns of the direction of the institution. I think this is, of course, a very classic concern of young people from classroom, from theories, and now they are using those into the practice. So we are hoping that they will be learning their lessons on that. I think that's one observation. But on the other hand, I think societies also expect a lot, I would say, from the students, from the demonstrations. These students, some of them could be our new political leaders in the future. Societies, as you know, are now expecting, maybe not the media, but society in general. If you look at the Facebook, if you look at the private but more influential social critiques, they are expecting the students to debate more about the future of the Thai economy, about the corruption problems in the political system. They want the students to debate more on the labor issues, on the human rights issues, much more than in the parliament. I think maybe the expectation is not realistic, but society are hoping that the students will talk more about the role of the superpowers in the region, the roles of the different institutions, the parliament, the independent institution, the court, and of course themselves. There are different organizations that are demonstrating. So some of those critiques of the student demonstration, they feel disappointed and let down. But I think this will be corrected in the next few series of demonstrations as the students are now moving to the parliament, as the students are now beginning to focus on the amending of the constitution, which is quite complicated issue. And maybe lastly, issues about and concerns about the economy, the well-being of all Thai people, how they are going to address those inequalities, how they are going to come up with a new series of issues that are much better than what they said, the national strategy that already laid down by the government. So in the next few demonstrations, there will be even higher expectation from the general public for the students to debate on those issues.
Dr. Panitan, you are a chief advisor to the Prime Minister. So how do you think the General Prayut is looking at the situation right now in the aftermath of the Sanam Luang rally?
Well, I think Prime Minister is already indicated his concern before the demonstration. Number one priority and concern is how to contain the spread of the COVID-19, and this is the most concern of Prime Minister and administration right now. Right now, I think the Ministry of Health are now advising demonstrators to self-quarantine themselves for 14 days, just to make sure that they are not spreading any flu or any viruses. I think this is the number one concern. Of course, number two is, of course, how to move their demands, how to accommodate their changes. I think the Constitution amendment is already discussed and talked about among the current administration and the Parliament. So this is the second, I think, priority, just to make sure that the government can accommodate this demand. And of course, lastly, of course, is a concern about the well-being of the Thai people, the economy that will be affecting, by demonstrations and on top of the COVID-19 spreading. So I think the challenges ahead for the Prime Minister is more complex now.
Mm-hmm.
So how will the Prime Minister handle the situation if some of the demands from the students are addressed in the Parliament this Thursday?
Well, I think it's quite clear that the Parliament may have to take a leading role in terms of legal issues, including the amending of the Constitution, which requires a complex series of actions, including the national referendum again on the issue. And there are a lot of debates on proposals. 6 proposals are now tabled at the Parliament to be debated. I think that's one effective way under the democratic system to handle, that is to the elected and to the parliamentary system. And of course, I think the Prime Minister and the Cabinet may have to engage more with the public in general to make sure that they understand the issues. They are less worried about the political situation affecting their own well-being. I think the engage with the people in terms of carrying out the services in a normal way will also be of high priority for the Prime Minister. And of course, this is the first time Prime Minister in the capacity of the Prime Minister will be facing students and other demonstrations. He used to be an army chief or assistant army chief when handling the demonstration large like this many years ago. I recall him as an effective person in handling this, and now he seems to be quite able and in a position to lead the nation during this time. So I think in general, Prime Minister is ready mentally and with his experience in the past 10 years in handling situation like this. I think it should be a reassurance to the Thai public that he is one of the most suitable person during this time to handle the situation.
All right. So the protesters said they will be back again. So they will be rallying again at the Parliament this Thursday. And then on October the 14th, they said they will hold another major rally. So is there anything we should be worried about?
Well, I think the demonstrations are now taking place simultaneously on ground and on air. I think on ground, the physical, the anatomy of the demonstration is well known. I think, of course, less well known to the outsiders of Thailand, but on the ground, when you need to move large numbers of people from different places from the suburbs of Bangkok from Bangkok itself, from the north and the northeast in particular, less so in the south in general. The tracking the movements and the origins of these are well known. I think it's easier to handle, except maybe some groups, inside the big cities. That's a more it's a more challenge to handle them. But in terms of setting up measures to make sure that everybody is safe, everybody is secure during the demonstration, will not be that difficult. But there are some concerns only in terms of outsiders trying to make sure that there's no peace and no stability. But those are the concerns that are quite limited in that area. But on air, I think it's different. This is a new situation for the government. This is the first time that the network on air, the social network in particular, is very, very intense. And sometimes those messages may not be correct, or maybe based on the emotion, or sometimes they could violate other people's rights, ending up in many legal cases. So those are more, I think, more of a challenge for the authority to handle. But of course, the handling of the situation on ground and on air must be according to law and rules and regulations, and based on freedom of expression guaranteed by Constitution. So for the government, it is a complex situation, but we hope that they can handle that successfully in October.
Okay, Dr. Panitan, thank you very much for your views and perspectives. We'll talk to you again in our Thai language service in about 20 minutes from now. So thank you for this portion of the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Okay.
And we'll be leaving you tonight with images of the trash tsunami at Honduras Beach, leaving nightmare scenes of tropical beaches versus large piles of garbage, which is definitely a good reminder for us to take care of the environment. And that wraps up tonight's edition of Thai PBS World Tonight. Kun Thep Chai and I'm Nat standing off, and we'll see you at 8 p.m. with Than Lok of Thai PBS World. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.